Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my wrap-up and results for my first round of 5-star TBR predictions. The first person to do this kind of video was actually Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings, and I will link her original video down below. I will also link the video I did where I predicted these 5-star books, and I do recommend watching that. It's really short and I go into a little more detail on what the predictions are and why I picked those books. So I finally finished those 5 books that I thought I would love, and now we're gonna see how I did and how well I actually know my own reading tastes. So just running through from the first one I read from the pile, the first was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Now this was an author I had never read before, and I was purely going off of other people's impressions and the feeling I got from the synopsis. All I really knew about this was everyone was a little bit in love with an ice demon and that everybody loved this book. And I was like, you know what? Sounds intriguing. And I heard a little bit more about the synopsis, that there was a lot of Russian and Eastern European folklore in it, and that's something I tend to really enjoy. So this was the first one I ended up picking up, and I did really enjoy it. I did love the setting and the atmosphere, like I thought I would, but a couple of big things came up that I wasn't really expecting. I didn't love the main character. Vasya was sort of a generic fantasy heroine to me. At least she reminded me of a lot of other main characters that I had read recently. But the bigger problem was based on like the plot or how the author wrote suspense, I guess. Because this whole book, the audience knows that something terrible is going to happen because nobody is listening to this one person, and it really started to irritate me that the only reason all of these characters were making dumb decisions was so that the plot could move forward. Like, even when it was out of character, they would do the stupidest possible thing just so that we could extend the plot. It felt like to me. So I didn't really enjoy that. But I did love the other aspects of the book so much that I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So I still really enjoyed it, but not a 5-star read for me like I thought. The next one I picked up was Blackheart by Holly Black. This is the 3rd book in the Curseworkers trilogy, and I actually thought this was kind of an easy choice because I had really enjoyed the first 2 books, and I had read Holly Black's works before. I was pretty confident, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. So not awful, but definitely nowhere near as high as I thought it was going to be. And for this one, it really came down to the ending. And I still highly recommend this trilogy, and I think some of the issues I had were things that wouldn't bother everybody, but I really didn't like the ending for this book. I don't think we could have gotten away with that if the main character were a female. There was just so many things about it that rubbed me the wrong way. I really didn't like some of the characters in this book who ended up getting a lot of page time, and I wasn't feeling the magic like I was for the other 2 books. So 3.75, not looking good for my 5-star TBR predictions. Next, things started looking up because I read The Handbook for Dragon Slayers by Mary Haskell. I read and loved her other 2 books. Both of those were 5 stars, and both of those were like some of my favorite books of the year. So I was pretty confident that I would enjoy this one, and I did. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I think part of that was because it's almost as a result of me loving the author's books so much, because even though I really enjoyed this one, for some reason I just felt there was a tiny bit of the spark missing that made me love the other 2 books so much, but I still really enjoyed this one. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars, so getting pretty close. Next, I read Moxie by Jennifer Matthew. Now this has been such an incredibly hyped book that I was reasonably confident I would enjoy it because it sounded amazing. It's about a feminist revolution, which, yes please, and everybody was saying such incredible things about this book that I kind of thought this one would be a no-brainer. And then I talked a little bit about this in my wrap-up, but I started reading it a couple months before I finished it, and I really didn't like the writing style. Like, I didn't click with the storytelling. It wasn't nearly as engaging as I hoped it would be, so I actually set it down for a while, planning to come back to it, which I eventually did. And the second time, I just flew through this book. I loved it so much. I think the writing style really improved, and even though I don't think the love interest was a necessary character at all, really, I still loved this book so much. Like, the things that it says about feminism and the importance of a reasonably healthy school environment, just there were so many good points this book made while still drawing attention to the flaws of some of the earlier movements and how exclusionary they could be to, for example, women of color or gay women. This was just such an incredible book, and this was my actual first 5-star read for my 5-star TBR predictions. And finally, the last book on my 5-star TBR list was Heart's Blood by Juliet Marillier. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which is one of my favorite fairy tales to read a retelling of, and I pretty much see this on everybody's list of like favorite or best retellings, so I was very optimistic. Plus, I had read and adored Wildwood Dancing by this author. Like, that was one of my favorite fairy tale retellings I have read up to this point still, so I was pretty excited about this one. But something I don't think I mentioned in my announcement or like prediction video was that I actually read the sequel to Wildwood Dancing, and I gave it 1 star, and I hated that book so much. And I probably should have taken that into consideration with my expectations for this book, because I didn't hate it, but this was definitely not a 5-star book. The beginning really wasn't working for me. It took me a while to get invested in it, but I think I picked it up at kind of the wrong time. I just wasn't in the mood for this kind of book, because I picked it up later and things improved almost immediately. I was loving it. The middle of this book especially was just so great. I really loved the characters and the character development, and I really came to enjoy Katrine as a protagonist. Plus, I thought the Irish folklore elements of this story were really well done. There were just a lot of things that I loved about this book, so I was thinking that even with the lackluster beginning, this could be a 4.5-star book, possibly even a 5-star. And then the ending happened. I don't think a disappointing ending always ruins a book by any means, but in this case, it sort of did. Some of the reasoning is a little more subjective than the other things I've been talking about, because it ends with this trope that I absolutely hate. And not just that, but I actually think that the use of that trope sort of negated some of the positive messages earlier in this book. I can't really tell you what they are because of spoilers, but I just really didn't like that about this story. And even though, like I said, I came to really enjoy the main character and I was starting to really enjoy the romance, even that sort of petered out towards the end. I just didn't really click with the main characters anymore. I didn't feel anything when the 2 love interests were together. I just didn't care anymore. I was just reading to get to the end of the book and move on. Plus, as the book went on, I started noticing some other flaws that weren't really getting better, like the fact that the main character is so bright and intelligent, and like she figures things out sometimes in really interesting ways. She's a scribe, which was amazing. It was so interesting. But there's a couple of really big things that nobody notices, or that like nobody thinks could be important until the end of the book, when everything just hits the fan. Plus, the climax of this book happened at a really weird spot, I feel like. There was all this build-up, and then there was a big event that was pretty interesting, and then there were like, how many more pages? I don't know, it feels like there were 30 or 40 pages of like resolution and like an epilogue. I don't know. I ended up feeling kind of meh about this book, so I also gave this one 3.75 stars. I'm not saying I don't recommend it, because a lot of people love it, and some of the things I talked about I don't think are going to bother everyone. But if you have really similar tastes to me, I would sort of like keep that in mind, like the other criticisms of this book. Maybe consider that before you pick this one up. So, out of the 5 books that I thought I would give 5 stars to, the only one I actually did was Moxie by Jennifer Matthew. This was really interesting for me because I obviously felt pretty confident about all of these choices, or I wouldn't have picked them. But it did make me realize that I'm not as foolproof at choosing my own reading as I could be, which in a way is kind of exciting because it means that books can surprise me still, which is really great. It is funny to be confronted with the fact that I really don't know what I'm gonna like sometimes. Or let me amend that. I'm pretty good at figuring out what books I'm going to enjoy, but I'm not great at figuring out what books I'm going to love. And actually for a while I was thinking about the element of surprise and how maybe that's a big component for 5-star books. You know, books I end up really loving are ones that I maybe didn't expect much from, or I just didn't know what to expect from. You know, I went in blind. But then the book that I ended up giving 5 stars to, the only one, was Moxie, which was, I think, the most hyped definitely the most hyped out of all of these books. So I don't know, I think it was a really interesting experiment. I definitely plan on doing this again because I did have fun, even though my results were not as good as I was hoping for. This was a really interesting and fun experiment, and I do feel like I'm a little better now at sort of gauging my preferences or expectations. I don't know, maybe I'll fail next round too. But another thing I love about this is it's shown me that some of my reading preferences that I thought were deal breakers are actually not necessarily, or at least not in every case. Because again, going back to Moxie, if I really don't like the writing style of a book, I pretty much can't give it more than 4 stars, like at the highest, because that's a big thing for me. And the love interest angle. Like, I really hate unnecessary romantic subplots. I enjoy romance as a side plot in books, but if it takes over the story or if I feel like it's out of place, it can pretty much tank a book for me. So the fact that I still loved Moxie despite those 2 deal breakers, I think that's pretty cool. So those are my results for my first round of 5-star TBR predictions. You guys comment and let me know what you thought of these books, if you read any of them, or if you're doing the 5-star sort of challenge, how is it going for you? Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!